Real estate scams are costing investors, tenants, and everyday people millions of dollars, and we're going to help you try and avoid them.
Yeah, we got to be careful here, guys. There's a lot of stuff going on online, social media, the internet. You got to be very, very careful. Our office personally is under attack almost daily because we get emails from financial institutions asking for passwords and stuff like that. So today we're going to talk about all that.
Yeah, and before we go into specifically the scams that we're seeing, there are certain things that should be a red flag to you. So, if you're a tenant and you're trying to rent something or you're trying to buy something, pressure to act quickly is going to be a big flag.
That's number one.
Yeah.
So if somebody needs something immediately, then you should immediately pause. I'll tell you what, I'm so freaked out by a lot of this stuff. What I do now is I just delete stuff. Like
Well,
I got one today.
yeah, well, but I know, but I'm also, but if they're trying to rent a place or something like that, they
I
can't
know,
delete
but you
it.
you got to be careful,
Yeah.
right? Because what happens is, they put one letter off, like in an email chain.
Yeah. Yep.
Like we got one that said Wells Fargo. It was WELS Fargo.com.
Right. Right.
They left out one L and had the logo.
Yep. So the second thing is that there's not a lot of paperwork. When you're doing anything with real estate, there should be a lot of paperwork. It should be thorough. So if somebody that you are working with is not giving that to you, then I think that that is a big red flag. And also too good to be true, right? If the rental units usually rents for 2,000, it's listed for 1,200, that should be a flag that something might not be right here.
Yeah, and you guys all know everything's now no cash, no checks or anything. It's all heading to wires. And so the wire fraud scams are really, really high alert. Like I was just meeting with one of the big people at First American Title the other day, and this is one of their biggest problems is the wire fraud.
Yeah, so that's the first one we're going to be talking about. So the wire fraud scam is a big deal. It's basically when you're told you need to wire money, whether that's for rent or whether that's to purchase a home or for anything else. These scammers are getting really, really creative. And like Ken said, they might even have one letter off in their email trying to get you to wire them money. And they're really convincing. Like I almost fell for a wire fraud scam on my first deal. I was ready to close. The funds were going to be due. They were due like that next day. And somebody that had one letter off in the email from the mortgage company I was working with said, "Hey, we messed up. We need you to send the money over today, actually. Here's the wire information." And it was from my mortgage rep. They knew my exact balance that I owed. They knew the date that it was due. The only reason I didn't fall for it, being a brand new, it was my first home I was buying. I had no idea, was because I actually didn't know. I never wired money before. So I called Tyler, my mortgage guy, like, "Hey, how do I wire this 50 grand? Like, you sent me that email. I don't know how to wire it." He's like, "Wait, I didn't send you an email to wire money,
Yeah.
but somebody had hacked into their database, got all the information." So to me, it looked totally legit because they, like I said, they knew how much I needed to close. I didn't even think, like, they made the signature the same. I mean, it didn't even occur to me that this was a scam.
Well, and you guys may or may not know there was $446 million in losses just in the real estate industry reported last year. That is a lot of money. And what's going to happen is you're not going to hear about it. This is not going to hit the mainstream press, but it makes a tremendous amount of sense. People don't need to break in your house anymore to steal from you,
Right,
right?
absolutely.
They're going to do all this stuff. So you got to be very, very, very careful. One of my very good friends started a company called LifeLock. And I'll never forget. He's like, like especially around Christmas time, they bring these temporary workers in to kind of help at the retail, and they say, "Hey, give me your social and get 10% off on this one specific purchase." And so you're handing your social security number over to these people. There's a whole industry trying to scrape identity, and this, and they need all that stuff in order to make the wires work, right?
Yeah, all they need you to do is wire them money, actually. They just need to convince you to wire them money. They don't need your social or anything to do that. That's you wiring them the physical money. So The way to prevent this is you want to make sure you speak to your mortgage broker. If you start to get a weird email or an email that seems, they want you to send money, just call your mortgage broker, make sure it was them that sent the email, make sure that these are, you have a sheet with the wire information on it. Typically, that's all in your closing paperwork. But you never ever, because once you wire money, they cannot get it back. Like there's nothing anybody can do. Your money is gone.
Yeah. And as you guys, some of you might be scaling your business. So I have this exact problem with my whole company. You think about it, we got 300 people. So not everyone has their hand on the ability to wire, but there's a lot of people inside of my accounting department that do, because as you grow, you start to delegate different kinds of things. So you might want to take a look at your systems, because we're getting these kinds of things coming in at all departments at all times. They can come in from vendors. That it doesn't always have to be around real estate closings. It can be, we've had them from people pretending like they were contractors that are owed money. There's all kinds of ways, but these wire fraud scams are a big deal, and it's going to continue to grow.
Absolutely. And so, I think it's just important. It's never going to be an emergency for you to wire money unless you miss something and you really do have money, do it close. But even then, you're going to be in contact. Your mortgage broker's not going to send an email. They're going to call you if it's an emergency. And the mortgage companies don't like to talk about this because it looks bad for them. So they never warn you, like, watch out for, phishing, or watch out for this or that, or don't wire any money, because it doesn't look good for them to admit that maybe that's happened to them before.
Right. A bank is not going to come out and be public about this.
Right.
Right. As you know, from working
at a bank. Yep. One thing I know from working at a bank is banks get robbed all the time, and it does not make the news because they do not report it. They don't want people to know.
We're going on a little rabbit hole.
We are.
But Danille actually worked at a bank that got robbed.
Yeah. Our bank got robbed, and we were in a territory of 15 banks. And they would get robbed all the time, right? Like every few months, the bank would get robbed. It doesn't mean they came in with guns and whatever, but the bank, they never wanted the police to know. They didn't want to make it public. They don't want people to not want to come to the bank. So just keep that in mind next time.
If you're a bank, the last thing you're going to say is that I lost this much money of customers' money. So this stuff is all kind of below the surface, guys. So we're just, and please go online and look for other ways. But the number one thing is, have a personal relationship with whoever it is you have at the bank, and make sure you call and verify.
Absolutely.
That's the biggest thing.
So the second scam that's going around a lot right now is the short-term rental scams.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Those are a big one.
It's huge right now.
Yep, 400 million in losses just last year. So they're easy to con people, because when you're doing a short-term rental, usually you're on vacation, you've never been there, you don't know where the home is or who owns it. And a lot of times, these people are on these sites like VRBO, Airbnb, but then they ask you to go off the site to do the payment.
By the way, guys, 12,000 people last year fell victim to this.
Yep.
This is a big deal.
Yeah.
So why don't you explain how it works?
Well, basically, they can use any platform. They can use Facebook, they can use Airbnb, VRBO. And we've all seen this, right? Like when you're on Airbnb, sometimes the host says, hey, if you want to avoid the Airbnb fees, we can take this off Airbnb. And a couple things can happen. One, sometimes they don't even own the home. There's no home.
A lot of times.
Yeah, there's no home for
There might not even be a home to rent. All they need is an address. So let's say you guys have a place that you're listing online. They can easily take that exact same thing, look for customers, and try to get cash. That's exactly what's happening.
And they listed at a really good price, like we were saying before, because obviously if you're a scammer with no real home to rent, you don't really care how much you're renting it for, right? You just want to get people, right? You've also seen it where they cancel on people when they're there. So it's like there is the home and they do own it, but then last minute they cancel it, so that, and they don't give you your money back because you're not on those platforms anymore. And then the last thing that they do, and actually we sort of fell victim to this one time as well, is when we went to California and the house. So basically the house isn't necessarily what it's marketed to be, right? There's some issues with it. There's some leaking.
By the way, this was a $30,000 a month house.
Yep, $30,000
right on
a month
the
house.
beach. And we're like, oh,
but the lady wanted to go off Airbnb, and we
did it
with a lease, but it was leaking, there was mold, there was like water coming through the ceiling in one of the rooms. I mean, we stuck it out for a month. It was right on the beach, but if if it would have been an Airbnb, we probably would have said, hey, this isn't really what we signed up for. Yeah.
I know a lot of you guys are trying to save money, but I would suggest you stay on Airbnb and VRBO. There's a reason those are set up. That protects the consumer.
Right.
It protects both parties, but when you go offline, things start to get a little sketchy. Be very, very careful.
Right. And also, just make sure this happens to a lot of like traveling nurses in the midterm rental space as well. Just make sure that it's legit and then the people own it. I think to prevent it, you want to go through those sites like Airbnb and VRBO. I know for us now, we always go through the sites. And then if we're going to re-rent the next year and, we've gotten to know the landlord, sometimes we'll go off of there and have a lease.
Yep.
But that first time, I think you should go through the platforms.
Yeah. This is a big one. This is only going to keep going up.
Right.
It actually happens not just with short term either. Like, it's funny. I was looking for a classic car. I looked. I was like, this seems kind of weird, and I cut and pasted it, and it came up on an actual auto dealer. Like a classic car auto dealer back in the Midwest. And somebody else was in there like, oh, just give me $1,000 deposit and I'll hold the car. And this can happen with anything.
And I want to actually take it the other way too, because Eli said that, he has a lot of people that ask on Airbnb to go off of Airbnb and he, declines. And I do want to bring that up because, like we are running a place right now. We're going to run it again next year. We decided to go off Airbnb, and, the people that own this property gave us a lease that's like a sheet of paper. Okay. You know what I mean? So if you are a host and you're going to take it off Airbnb, you want to make sure you have a thorough lease as well to protect yourself the other way.
Yeah. The reason why we're doing it is because we like this place. It's perfect. And for our dogs and our kids and all that kind of stuff. And so we now are in a relationship with the owner and we've gotten to meet them. And so we're just doing it.
Right. And you just have to remember, a lease protects you. So, for us, this is a great lease, but there's a lot of caveats in it that obviously we're not going to exploit, but it's not a great lease for them.
Yeah.
So the third one I really want to dig into, because these are the rental scams. And I think that this is the biggest thing that's going on right now. And I think that the tenants are dealing with this because they're trying to find a place to live long term. And I think that landlords are dealing with this because tenants are getting scammed so much that they're very scared to send any money or do anything, for anything, right? So basically, this can happen obviously when you rent something sight unseen from a smaller landlord, but it can also happen if you're there and they tour a place that maybe isn't theirs.
Right.
And they say, this is a wonderful condo, you're going to love this, and you're in it. And then they don't actually own it, And so like, it might be their boss's place. It might be a friend's place. It might be a place that, they somehow have keys to. And so it gets very, very dicey, and I feel bad for tenants because there's a lot of people that are losing money to this.
So guys, this happened to me. So I'll tell you what happened. I built a condo project in Vegas and I kept the models and I rented them forever. And then I decided, well, I'm just going to sell these things off because they're small little rentals in Las Vegas. And I'm just going to peel these off because they're kind of pains in the butt. So I had a property manager for that. And then I decided to lease it. I decided to sell it. Okay. So I went from obviously renting it to wanting to sell it. Well, now it's vacant and, in good shape for somebody touring it. Well, what happened was somebody threw a renter in there.
Oh, yeah.
While it was being listed. So it went from a rental to a sale. And of course, I live in Scottsdale and my realtor, he's like, somebody's renting your place. I'm like, oh my gosh. So now we have a situation where they actually paid somebody else. And so, this is a real thing, especially when there's vacancy. And this is kind of the point. What happened was the realtor, of course, tours the property. People are out getting listings. when they can, when there's somebody interested in that. They're not checking your place all the time while it's vacant. And so somebody in that community saw that this thing had been vacant for, 30 days, 60 days, and they took advantage of that. So that's actually what happened. And then Tony called me and he's like, "Oh my gosh, there's somebody in your place." And so then we had to go into this whole thing, whatever you want to call that, a squatter or something, but people are pissed. They're in there and sometimes they move stuff in. Somebody else took the money. So this can happen with the vacancy. So if you're out of state and you're not checking your place, just be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how do you prevent this, right? Because you need a place to stay. You're not going through a platform like Airbnb. You're going on Zillow or Facebook. And this is a lot of money, right? Because a lot of times this is thousands of dollars to hold a place. But I think the first thing that you should look out for is if the price is too good to be true.
Yeah, for sure.
Like that's a big
yeah,
flag.
if you guys are getting a huge deal, there's a reason, right? Be
Right.
careful of that.
And I would say that's pretty common because think about it. If you're a scammer, you're trying to scam as many people as you can. If you list your place in market, you're not going to get, 10 applications that want to rent this place, right? So the place has to be pretty under market. So I would say that would be a huge red flag.
If it's too good to be true, then it literally is too good to be true.
Exactly, right? And the second thing is like that rushing, right? That rushing to close, that rushing
We
to
have somebody else
sign.
interested, you need to
Yeah.
get your money in right away.
Yeah.
Any kind of that, just stay away from.
Yeah.
'Cause that's not the state of the rental market right now, by the way.
It's not. It has been, but it's not right
It's
now.
not right now. Right
Yep.
now, there's not a bunch of people beating down the door to rent
Yeah.
units. So,
Yeah.
so that's if it is the case, then just say, "I'm sorry, you need to take the necessary steps because you could be wiring or sending your money to somebody that doesn't even own the place."
Yep. And I think another one is tenant screening, right? Like, as a landlord, you want to screen tenants. As a rental scammer, I don't think you care what their credit score is, the background is, right? So if they're not doing a credit and background check on you, I think that can be a flag as well.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. They're just trying to get cash up front. The system should be this, should always be this. They should be getting an application from you, running a criminal credit background check. And then, of course, you're getting a lease and there's a deposit and, and then you actually are physically seeing this place. You should actually make sure that you're physically walking this place. And you can actually pull title if you want. You can actually go see who owns something online.
But it might be under an LLC.
It could be, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Even if it's under an LLC, that's okay. Then you can go check on the LLC. So most of you guys are in the real estate business. You realize that a lot of these places are owned by LLCs. You should not own a lot of stuff in your own name. You should own it in some kind of an entity for asset protection purposes. But there is a way to see who owns, who the owners are, the members or the managing members inside of those LLCs. So just take that little bit of extra step.
Yep. And also with the lease should be pretty thorough. It shouldn't be a one sheet, right? And so that would be a flag for me if, somebody was like, yeah, just sign this, send the money and we're good to go, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, we got the lease and I go, let me see the lease. And it's a one pager.
yeah.
And I read it. I go, okay, this is good. This protects us.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, it can go either way.
Right.
Like the more sophisticated landlords are going to have very complex leases because they've been through a lot. The ones that don't have as much experience, they're going to have the one pagers. Now, they're gray, they're open, not everything's in there, but that can actually be good for both sides.
Right.
To be honest.
Yep.
The tighter the lease, the more language, the harder it is, to have, well, I guess things aren't as gray.
Well, and I can see how this could happen a lot too, because like I just had a couple move in from Seattle last year. They had never been to Arizona. They needed a place. We did a virtual walkthrough on FaceTime and they rented it and everything was fine. But if I was a scammer, they would have been an easy people to scam. And I do think if you're renting in state, you need to physically go see the property, meet the person that's showing it to you. Do you have a weird feeling about them? Do they seem, on the up and up, right? If you're renting from out of state, this is a time to use a realtor, I believe.
Yeah.
If you're
Or
not
property
renting,
manager.
yeah, right. If you're not renting from like a big apartment complex, because you need an advocate for you to go down, look at the unit, spot anything, make sure it's in a good area, and make sure that people aren't a scammer, right? Because if you're coming from out of state, that's the easiest way to scam you. And it happens a lot. Like I saw it a lot in my other company about traveling nurses. They get scammed a lot because they're coming to an area, they need to stay for 3 months. They don't want to, most of the time that's not on Airbnb or VRBO. And then they get there and there's nothing there for them to rent. And so I think that those situations, you need a realtor, you need an advocate.
Here's the thing. Do you just know that if you're the one trying to lease something, then it's paid for by the person that's actually listing the place. So, this is going to be the landlord's expense. It's going to be the seller's expense. So use somebody local in the area. If you're trying to do something from out of state, out of the country, make sure you have somebody local, some advocate. Doesn't really matter, right?
Right.
You just need to make sure that you're not just flying blind.
Yeah, and you're not just like sending money through just any old way, right? Like a check is a good way because at least it's got to be made out to a certain company or a certain person, versus just sending with Zelle or Venmo.
That's
or
a really
whatever.
good point. So
Mhm.
on the lease, as an example, so you can pull title on any place. And so, and it'll have, let's say, the LLC name. Make sure that the check is in that LLC name.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what the bank account should be in. It should not be in somebody's individual name.
Right.
That's a really important point. If you just send it to John Smith and it's even John Smith Real Estate LLC, it needs to be in the name of John Smith Real Estate LLC. That's what the check should be written out to, because that is the legal owner on title.
Absolutely. So the fourth scam I want to get into is more for homeowners, but it's those home inspection scams when you go to buy something or sell something, right? And a lot of times, anybody can pretend to be a home inspector. It's very easy to get a, $100 website from Wix and just throw it up there, and you're going to pay them and they're going to tell you there's no real issues with the house.
I know. I know. You guys need to be careful. So obviously, if you're the listing agent, you're going to want to use your home inspection person, because they're not going to want to kill your deal. You're going to want an independent. You should always have an independent. So if you're being represented by an agent, let's say, then you're going to want to make sure that you go with that person, because you want there to be a little bit of conflict. I mean, not real conflict, but you just don't want everything just to slip right through. The listing agent is supposed to be trying to sell the place. They're the one getting paid for by the seller, not necessarily by you. And I know we've got dual agency and a bunch of other things that they're supposed to be independent and all that. But at the end of the day, if a homeowner or a home inspection comes in and there's all kinds of problems, all of a sudden the buyer's now negotiating with the seller. And so you just want to make sure it's independent.
Yeah. And you want, like he said, you want that, Eli called it resistance, right? You don't want them to be okay with the deal going well. Ken and I are in the process of getting a home, and, our inspectors kind of upset the seller, but that probably wouldn't have happened if it would have been his inspectors.
Well, that happened. So we're exactly what the listing agent said. Oh, you can use our home inspector. Of course, we're like, no, we'll use our own. And then, of course, they came and the seller was freaking out and the listing agent was freaking out. And they had very specific things that were flushed out that we asked them to do. And so that's the thing. It goes from being biased to unbiased. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to how much they're charging too, right? If you go with a really cheap company, that is more likely to be a scam, or they're more likely to not do a good job. We always say don't skimp on the home inspection, and certainly don't hire the cheapest company. That is not where you want to be saving money.
Yeah. You want to, and you want them to be super thorough, right? And that's part of the thing. You want them to go through all the systems, on the roof, the plumbing, the electrical, all that kind of stuff. You want somebody who understands all that. And the home inspection business is kind of sketchy.
Yeah.
in some cases.
Yeah, it can be.
You can, especially if you're just cranking them out, like on some of these production homes. They're literally like a report. They just flip the address, change the address out, and ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. You want somebody who really understands from a trade standpoint all these different aspects and goes out and takes photos. And so make sure that the home inspection is incredibly thorough.
So you can easily prevent yourself from falling for scams by doing good due diligence, not trying to find the cheapest price, and make sure you have the right paperwork and thoroughly look over everything.
Yeah. So as an example on the one that we're going through, and this happened before, we'll get the report could be 20, 30, 40, even 50 pages. And super detailed with photos and everything. So it's extremely thorough. And then from there, you can kind of decide, is it something I want to push back on or something I don't care about?
So before we hop into our questions, let's talk about Limitless. Limitless is coming up.
Yeah, baby. So I'm going to say something that this is going to freak you guys out. I had a call last week with
RFK.
Yep, RFK himself, RFK. And it sure looks like he's coming.
Yep.
So you're the first to know. We haven't announced it.
Yep.
And we were working on this for months. As you can imagine, he's pretty busy. And it was cool. I had an incredible 1-hour call with him, and he's excited. He's coming to Limitless at the end of August. That's not the only reason you would want to come, but we have 50 speakers, 2,000 people. We're cranking it. I know we've sold out the last 2 years, and it's very, very, very exciting. This is the one event I do each year. This is not a newbie type conference. This is a conference with a lot of people that are starting businesses, have multiple businesses, exiting businesses. It's not a real estate conference either. It's we got some really good people talking about AI and how to implement AI. We've got people talking about gold, silver, oil, gas, timber, water, all these different things that, are also good investments. So all of that. So we hope to see you guys there. And Jerry, if you put that up again, we got a code, I think, for Limitless.
Yep, it's 1010.
1010. Yeah, just type in 1010. You get a discount.
Yep,
and
10% off.
We hope to see you guys there.
Awesome. So let's hop into our premium questions. I'm going to start with the first one from Danica. She's asking, will a decrease in rates in September lead to an increase in real estate prices, even if it's just a small quarter point decrease?
Yeah, I just don't see it personally.
You don't think that prices will go up?
Well, they're already going up.
Yeah.
It's a supply problem, and it's possible, I suppose. But a quarter point is not that significant, because what you really have to look at is how quickly they went up. I guess it's possible, but usually lower rates create bubbles, but a quarter point is not that significant based on, how far they went up. So it could provide some relief in some areas, but I don't think so. It's not going to be enough for people to jump out and refinance. It's not going to be, it'll help a little bit, but the prices, I think we passed 450 on the average price of a home.
Yeah.
I think they're still going up generally, and commercial real estate's in trouble still. And a quarter point is helpful, I suppose, but not meaningful.
But I think with a quarter point, I have a little different opinion, because I think with a quarter point, people solve to that monthly payment. So I do think that prices of real estate could go up if they lower rates.
Well, yeah, I mean, what is it? Be $50 or $75 probably.
Yeah, but I still think that
something, I suppose. Yeah.
And I also think too that more people will hop on that bandwagon of, I can refi out of this if I buy now. Because they'll think
possible. I think
rates will keep going down.
Here's what I would think. I think people are they're gonna take note, and they're gonna see where the Fed goes for the next one. And so are you going to see this onslaught of people go out and buy? I don't think so. We've got a lot going on the last half of this year, including a wild election. And obviously this will just be a couple months before, and who knows what's going to go on with regard to all that, with Biden stepping down and Kamala stepping up, and it's just going to be a wild few months. So
it is. I know that was the big announcement yesterday with Kamala. So So Jeremy's asking, if the numbers make more sense to rent than buy in my area, should I continue to rent? I can afford to buy. I am 30.
Yeah, it's a good question. So this has a lot to do with um, what. So if it's your primary home, I'm a huge believer that you should own a home, and you should, instead of paying a landlord, you should be paying yourself, and you're just chipping away at your mortgage payment. So over a long period of time, the one thing you got to consider is inflation. So, it sure looks to me like, even though the Fed's now celebrating, they're somewhere between 2 and 3% inflation. Even at 2 and 3% inflation, you're still going to have inflation. And so, if you just hold this thing for 10 years, the chances of it being, I guess, inflated by 20 to 30 to 40% is high based on inflation. And at the same time, if you're paying down your mortgage, you're going to have that. So you're going to have your mortgage being paid down, and you're going to have the economy is going to be inflating. So this is a hard asset strategy time. You want to be in hard assets, whatever those might be. And that's specifically what we're going to be talking a lot about at Limitless. Is hard assets typically move with inflation. So that's where you want to be. You do not want to be in cash, because if you have 100 grand in the bank and you have 100 grand in the bank in 5 years, it's the same 100 grand, but it buys you less. And that's actually the big issue. The big issue is prices are going up over time. Not everything, of course. There are some things that are deflationary, but most are inflationary. So it's a really good question, really astute question. But I'm a huge believer that everyone should own real estate. And by the way, it doesn't have to be your primary residence. You can buy one and have a tenant pay it off. It's just, you want to be in the game, in my opinion.
Yep. So Chad's asking, I'm in the market and I've had great appreciation over the last 5 years, which has created much equity in my properties. Those same properties all got refinanced to rates below 4%. I have all this equity, but I'm not sure how to access it without losing my low rate. They all have great cash flow. Do I sell in 1031, or is there a better strategy?
Yeah, what a great question. So I'm in this situation, and most people are in this exact same situation. I believe that if you've got your rates at under 4 or 4, then that debt is now an asset. Like, there's no one that can get that. And we might not see those rates for a long time. If maybe, I mean, this is the first time I've seen them that low, just to be honest. And when I first started coming into the business, we were at 7, 8%. Then it went all the way down to 6 or 7 or 5. And we're like, sweet. And then it went even lower. So what you guys have now just seen is something that I've never seen. And so it's possible that you would be sitting back on those and they're cash flowing. And I know you got all this equity. At some point, maybe you can do a line of credit against it. You could put a second against it, perhaps without getting rid of the first. But I would definitely not want to refinance out of those, because that's precisely what the lender wants you to do, because they're probably losing money on those, know. And so if you have that kind of fixed rate debt, man, that's gold.
Plus, if something's cash flowing like that, it's a risk to 1031 and into something else that, might not have that.
Yeah. And so I'm doing a 1031 right now, but it's in a piece of land that I have, and it's a $5 million piece of land. So I'm going to take that. There's no cash flow on it. So it's something I bought years ago. I'm going to roll that into something else that cash flows. That's different. If I had 3% debt on it and it was cash flowing, I probably wouldn't do it.
Yep, absolutely. So thanks you guys for checking us out. We'll see you next week.